Well, good evening, everyone, once again, and very welcome. My name is Olga Misha-Washington, and I am Charlotte's Regional Director and Educator for Club Z. It's my absolute pleasure to, on behalf of Marsha Merkulova, who's Club Z's fearless founder and Executive Director, and all of Club Z, to invite you to this evening session. Tonight, we present you with the second edition of our speaker series on BLM and anti-Semitism. Our topic for this evening, the revolution coming to a classroom near you. Now, before introducing our speaker for this evening, I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit of what Club Z does and why your team needs to be part of us if she or he isn't yet part of us. So Club Z exists to create a network of educated and articulate activists with a commitment to Zionism and who also advocate for Israel. In doing so, we cultivate the next generation of Jewish leaders who are proud and articulate and active in their communities and across the country. Now, doing so requires us to delve into conversations that some may deem a little bit too controversial, but if it impacts our teens, if it impacts our community, then it impacts us. And so Club Z doesn't shy away from those conversations. An example of this is our participation in the End Jew Hatred campaign, #EndJewHatred. Recently, we heard that convicted terrorist and plane hijacker, Leila Khaled, was scheduled to speak at San Francisco State University. And when we heard this, Club Z, together with other organizations affiliated with the End Jew Hatred campaign, chief of them being the Lawfare Project, we said, and these are my words, paraphrasing it, this isn't going to happen. So what did Club Z do? We hit the streets, we protested at Zoom's headquarters, we engaged with Zoom corporate. Zoom took note of what we were complaining against, of how the fact was you could not have a terrorist addressing people. And so Zoom canceled the option for San Francisco State University to share Leila Khaled's address. Now, when San Francisco State University recognized and realized that they couldn't use Zoom, they went to Facebook. So Club Z got its people up, we protested, said said Facebook, you can't do this, and Facebook canceled that. And then San Francisco State University went to YouTube, and we're like, no, we're also not gonna let you speak or have her speak on YouTube. And after a few moments, YouTube canceled her talk. So here at Club Z, we don't just try to talk the talk, we actually walk the talk too. With all of that being said, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce to you someone who I'm proud to call a colleague, Dr. Naya Lett. She's our speaker for this evening. Now, Naya is the Director of Education for Club Z. In this role, she develops and teaches Club Z's dynamic curriculum, helping to cultivate articulate and thoughtful teens who advocate for the Jewish people and the State of Israel. Naya is a scholar of Russian Jewish culture, and she writes about contemporary anti-Semitism. Before joining Club Z, Naya taught at the University of California in Los Angeles, where she obtained a PhD in Russian literature. Naya lectures widely on modern day anti-Semitism and was a scholar in residence at Oxford University through the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism. Now, after her presentation, ladies and gentlemen, Naya will answer as many questions as she can. So please, during her talk, you're more than welcome to, in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen, to write your questions. I will be reading out these questions to Naya, and we hope to get through as many of those as we can, still ending at the hour so that we respect your time. With that, Naya, over to you.
Thank you so much, Olga. What a pleasure it is to be introduced by someone like you. We're very, very lucky to have Olga on our team. Indeed, we welcome and I welcome all of your questions. Please challenge me. This is what Club Z is all about. We teach our teens to research. I tell our teens, I'm not God, I'm not a prophet, nor am I a rabbi. Don't believe everything I say, research it yourself. All right, today's talk comes as almost a series from about a month ago when we spoke last and posed a very important question about BLM. We asked the question of, is BLM, is the anti-Semitism that we're seeing a byproduct, meaning i.e. hijacked by radical fringes, or is it something structural to the movement itself? It was a very important conversation, and I hope many of you were there and learned with me. Part 2 of this series takes a closer look at the classroom. Since that talk, since the 1 month that I've given that talk, many parents, and I will be sharing today screenshots of many parents who are sending me absolutely radical literature that has been passed out in the classroom, and it's very alarming. I will deal with all of your questions at the end, namely a very big question. Am I being alarmist, or is something really happening? So the question that I begin with tonight, how is the classroom being used today by English teachers, social studies teachers, even science teachers? And secondary to that is why? What is the intent? What is the motivation? My argument tonight is that one of the institutions, which is education, is being radically changed, and it is used to hasten a revolution. What we're seeing on the streets, the language of social justice, the language of BLM, is now part and parcel of our content in schools. And I'm going to show you some evidence of that tonight. Now you must be thinking, wow, this is quite crazy. Why is Naya, who's very afraid of the revolution, here quoting Lenin? In fact, Lenin said that in order to hasten the revolution for Russia, we must take 1 step forward in order to take 2 steps back, because Russia wasn't ready for a revolution just yet. So he knew he had to slow it down a little by taking 2 steps back. So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take those 2 steps back and remind us all a little bit about BLM, its founders, its roots, the difference between BLM 2016 and today, and the Marxist Framework, which, by the way, the leaders and the organizers of the organization themselves call themselves, quote, trained Marxists. So let's take a look. For many of you, this will be a repetition, and I'm sorry if it is, but I think it's quite important to lay the ground and understand that BLM began as a very important movement to address, indeed, police brutality, racial injustice, and it happened in 2013, 2014, and it was catapulted with this hashtag of Black Lives Matter, very much a grassroots movement, but as we shall see later, it was mobilized into quite a centralized movement, often protest on the streets and often, unfortunately, leading to violence. All right, let's take a look at a snapshot from 2016 and 2020 BLM. As I've argued in my previous talk, in 2016, BLM was very centralized. It had a charter. You could point to a charter. You could say, this is their manifesto. This is what guides their principles. Also, they had strong alliances that you could prove, such as Nation of Islam with the notorious anti-Semite Farrakhan, the new Black Panther movement, which is also quite terrible in that it has trafficked a lot of anti-Semitism, CARE, which also is quite anti-Semitic. These alliances should raise a red flag for people who care about justice and Jews. Today, in 2020, BLM is not centralized, it's decentralized. What does that mean? There is no charter, you cannot find it. What there are is chapters in different parts of the country, and also, for instance, there's a BLM in the UK. So this is from the BLM website, BLM hashtag What Matters 2020. As long as the chapter of this particular location abides to these guidelines, basically that chapter can do what it pleases. So that's kind of the big difference between BLM 2016 and BLM 2020. Now I want to take a look at language. And we at Club Z believe that language is very much reflection of an ideological position. The first 2 points are from the website today. The last 2 points are from the manifesto, which is from 2016. I want to read these out loud slowly. Quote, we are a collective of liberators who believe in an inclusive and spacious movement. The United States is an empire, and the world is shaped by interlinked systems of white supremacy, imperialism, capitalism, and patriarchy. These 2 are today found on the website. Let's move on to the last 2. The US justifies and advances the global war on terror via its alliance with Israel, and it's complicit in the genocide taking place against the Palestinian people. They went on to call Israel an apartheid state, thereby delegitimizing, demonizing Israel and the Jewish people. I've highlighted and read some of these words, which are very, very important in our understanding of, as I said, language is a reflection of an ideological position. Let's take a look. Recall that today we're looking at institutions. The fabric of a society is made up of many things, one of which is the institution. There's the family as an institution, the religious, the economic. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're zooming in on one such institution, and that is our schools, zooming in on BLM and our schools. This particular image was something that we created, but it was actually inspired by my niece. My niece goes to a very prestigious private school in Los Angeles. They're online in school right now, and during the assembly, the students, both middle school and high school, there was an assembly where they were brought in a poet, a 14, 15-year-old street poet who used expletives such as the F word, talked about how he has, quote, white privilege, and how America is born of original sin. And it was quite crazy. Also, I'll show you that image later on throughout the presentation. Why this was an inspiration for me, this particular image, is that the students were told to come up to the board and make associations with words like privilege or anti-racism. And so this is kind of the inspiration for tonight's talk. Let's take a look again at the language and its reflection of ideological positions. In addition to BLM, everybody, at least in California, knows that there's a very problematic ethnic studies model curriculum that's already been applied to the California State's university system. It's already been given the green light. Governor Newsom is about to sign a bill, and we will talk about this at the end because today is the last chance, ladies and gentlemen. Today is the last day of open, that you can make open comments and write emails and really, really fight against this curriculum. Let's take a look at the language, and let's recall the language that we talked about when we looked at BLM. The ethnic studies model curriculum promotes critical thinking and rigorous analysis of history, systems of oppression, and the status quo in an effort to generate discussions and imagine new possibilities. Remember the BLM language. The United States is an empire and the world shaped by interlinked systems of white supremacy, imperialism, etc. Systems of oppression, systems of oppression. Anti-racism. Anti-racism is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing, again, systems and redistributing equity. By the way, the language of redistribution of equity is very much part and parcel of a Marxist framework. What do they mean by systems of oppression? What do they mean by interlocked systems? Let's take a closer look. The interlinked systems of oppression. If you were with us a month ago, we talked about the Marxist framework. We talked about that in the Marxist framework, the world is indeed divided between two opposing forces, the powerful and the powerless. Now, if we look at society through such a lens, it's not that it's an incorrect approach. That is indeed, in many ways, a correct approach. But here's the thing, here's the flaw. Here we have the powerful and here we have the powerless. People who are Marxists are interested in what happens in this space. What happens to the citizen, to the institution of education or media when the power and the powerless meet? What the thesis of the statement is that the powerful, because they are in the position of power, exploit the powerless and therefore must be the entire system. Remember we talked about systems, the entire system must be overturned. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, you can overturn the system, but then these people are going to be found themselves in the position of power, and it's an endless cycle. So this can't be the most productive way of analyzing issues of society. Remember we talked about this last time, and for those of you who haven't, again, the Marxist framework is understanding the world between powerful and powerless, woman, man, LGBTQ+, heteronormative, indigenous, the West, worker, landowner, person of color, white, Orient, the West, and of course, for our purposes, Jew and Zionist. Jew, without borders, powerless is accepted in this dynamic. In our diagram, the Jew would be here and the Zionist would be here. The Zionist, powerful. Why? Because Israel is seen as a powerful country. Indeed it is. Economically, militarily it is. And so if you look at the world through such a lens, absolutely, this category of individuals and institutions, if they have power, they must be exploiting it and they must be overturned. The system must be overturned. Key word here is system, and let us return to that word at the end. I want to take a look at something, and I'm going to shock you, I think, a little bit. I've kind of played a little, if you will, trick on all of you. I'm going to read something to you right now. This is a framework, progressive framework. Quote, "We say that morality is entirely subordinate to the interests of the privileged. That is why we say that to us, that is the progressive, there is no such thing as a morality that stands outside of systems of oppression. To us, morality is subordinated to the interests of the struggle of the people of color, to one who cares about social justice. All morality lies in this united discipline and conscious mass struggle against those in positions of power." Ladies and gentlemen, nobody today said this. This was said by nobody. This was said by Lenin in 1906, and I just did something very kind of sneaky. I cut certain words and I just replaced them with the words that we use today. I call this Marxism Updated 2.0 version. Lenin in 1906, speaking to a rally of youth, said the following: "We say that morality is entirely subordinated to the interests of the proletariat's class. That is why we say that to us there is no such thing as a morality that stands outside human society. To us, the progressive communist, morality is subordinated to the interests of the proletariat's class struggle. To a communist, all morality lies in this united discipline and conscious mass struggle against the exploiters, against those in positions of power." When I read this excerpt from Lenin's speech, I thought immediately as an educator that the thing I need to do is I need to cut and paste. I need to cut and paste the words of today: social justice, racial justice, anti-racism, identity politics, critical race theory, because these words are the words of the 19th and 20th century, but the framework is exactly the same. Now, many of you will ask me, Naya, what is the big deal? What are you so afraid of? What are you so afraid of with Marxism? Ladies and gentlemen, it's not that I'm afraid of Marxism, the theory. I'm afraid of Marxism in reality. Nationalism in theory is not dangerous. Nationalism in practice can be very dangerous, as we know. Marxism, when applied, it has been applied way too many times in the world and has had bad outcomes, terrible outcomes. Many times, when I used to teach at the university, I was shocked to find out that most students had no idea of the amount of people that died in the Soviet Union solely under Stalin, solely in those 20 or so years that Stalin ruled. Up to 50 million people. Everybody knows about the Nazis. Not that that's bad, they should. Marxism is very dangerous. Again, the theory, I'm not talking about the theory, I'm talking about how it manifests in reality. When I saw this, I wanted to bring this to you today because this particular paragraph you could encounter anywhere, but it wasn't said by anyone today. It was said by Lenin in 1906, and that should be alarming to all of us. BLM and our schools. Public schools across the country have endorsed Black Lives Matter movement. They've encouraged teachers, students, and parents to do the same. My niece in this very prestigious private school, her teachers, you know how on Zoom you could write your name, dialect, comma, comma, comma. The teachers write their names, comma, preferred pronoun, comma, BLM. Why? Why are they doing that? Surely it must be a signal. Everything is a signal. The gender pronoun is a signal. Not saying your gender pronoun is a signal, and indeed putting BLM. Why are teachers doing this? What's in it for them? Why are they? This is a very important question. I want you to take a look at the National Education Association. These are screenshots. You can go and look at this if you just Google BLM schools. The National Education Association of California in particular has an entire curriculum ready, made for teachers. If you click here, the 2020 Curriculum Resource Guide, there are ready-made lessons plans for preschoolers. One of the questions asked, there's an essay question for a 5th, 6th grader, and the essay question is as follows. What are ways that you can overcome your white privilege? That is a question. I just want to leave that with you all today. I want you to take a look at some screenshots of parents who've sent me some things that have that their children bring home. Let's take a look at this one. Unit 1, Social and Racial Injustice. This is called an Anticipation Reaction Guide. So the student reads these statements and has to agree or disagree. Statement 1, people are treated equally in society. Agree or disagree. There are certain privileges given to certain cultures. Agree or disagree. There are certain caste systems in our society. Agree or disagree. Children are born innocent and see the injustice of racism. Agree or disagree. Now, a lot of these are innocuous. They're not quite nefarious in and of themselves, these questions. But they're not just, hey, first of all, I should probably mention that if I was leading a class, I'd ask you all, what class do you think this was in? This was in 9th grade honors English. So it begs the question, why in 9th grade honors English are we studying about social and racial injustice? And let me tell you something else as an educator myself. This is a great example of a great educator. Why? Because before indoctrinating a student, you first have to do what is called scaffolding. Exercises, kind of warm-ups like in the gym. This is a warm-up exercise before getting into anti-racist training. You first warm up with these questions and you open the mind up to think in such ways. It's not that it's dangerous, but then comes the dangerous insertion, the dangerous insertion of the power and the powerless. The questions in and of themselves are not dangerous. They're inappropriate maybe to study in 9th grade honors English. But after asking those kinds of questions, the mind is open then to receive a theory, a Marxist theory, where the world is divided between the powerful and the powerless. And I know this because as a teacher, we often do these scaffolding exercises to, quote, open the mind before we want to teach content. All right, this is a screenshot from another school. Also, a list of the in-class novels for the school year potentially are Of Mice and Men, Fahrenheit 451, Restart, Chains, All-American Boys, Roll of Thunder, Hear Me Cry. All right, I have half of these, to be honest, I have not heard, but my interest was not in the titles of the books, but in the bold, the reasons. We're going to read Of Mice and Men to discuss disabilities. We're going to read Restart to discuss bullying. We're going to read All-American Boys to discuss brutality and racism. We're going to read this to discuss LGBTQ population. And we're going to read The Diary of Anne Frank for the Forgotten Voice / Catalyst for Change. So completely excising the Jewish, which is central to study of Anne Frank, which is the Holocaust. But again, understand that these works of literature are being treated in a Marxist framework. Again, interlocked systems of oppression. We're looking at literature not for the beauty of the prose, not for how the writer constructed the character, constructed the narrative. We're looking at this literature in a social justice engineering way. This is very dangerous because, again, you're opening the mind for a certain type of ideology. All right, let's take a look at this screenshot. This is the California Teachers Association, and for people who are interested after this talk, I'm more than happy to share this PowerPoint so that you can go research this yourself. If you click on each one of these, you will go into, again, ready-made curriculum, ready-made lesson plans on how to deal with racial justice organizing. Dear white people, this is what we want you to do, and a guide to equity and anti-racism. Keep in mind that word anti-racism is a very important word as it stems from critical race theory, and we'll discuss that in a bit. What are consequences for schools and administrators who do not utilize BLM? Well, there was this one school on the East Coast, the Rye Country Day School, was accused of racism by alumni. So I went on their website today, and now they've been threatened for cancellation, right? Because we're living in a society of cancel culture. On the school's website, they have now anti-racism community resources for lower school, middle school, upper school, because they were so terrified of the threat of being canceled. So I don't know if you guys recall this, this private school that was in the news about a month and a half ago, that the alumni accused the people of not doing race sensitivity training. Lo and behold, today, it's all there. So what's the consequence? You force people into compliance. I want to leave for a second BLM and take a look at this terrible, pernicious, very dangerous ethnic studies model curriculum that is going to be adopted in California. And ladies and gentlemen, what happens in California gets applied nationwide. So if you think you're living in a state where this is not going to come, it is going to come. A few things about the ethnic studies model curriculum. It grows out of critical race theory. We'll talk in a little bit what critical race theory is. Critical race theory was born about 1980s, 1990s. It was ethnic studies model curriculum also can be dated to 9/11 and the subsequent combating of Islamophobia. BLM is also very much part of it. And the ethnic studies model curriculum was actually started in 2010, not in 2018, not in 2019, 2010, 10 years ago, which prompts many of you on this call to ask, especially those who care about the Jewish cause, where were the Jewish organizations? Where were they? Were they asleep? Why didn't we know about this? Why did we just find out a year ago? So let's take a look at what the goal of ethnic studies is. The goal is to promote critical thinking and rigorous analysis of history, of systems of oppression, again, those systems of oppression that you have to topple, in the status quo in an effort to generate discussions and imagine new possibilities. Furthermore, if we zoom in on ethnic studies, the Jew in Israel, let's take a look at how the Jews Israel are treated in ethnic studies. The ethnic studies curriculum focuses on 4 groups and frames those groups, yes, in this oppressed, oppressor paradigm. The unit on white privilege names Jews and Irish as the sole races, if you will, in America who have, quote, white privilege. BDS in the classroom is framed as a civil and non-violent means of ostracizing a country, and everybody knows what we mean when we say BDS, Israel. All 13 members of the critical ethnic studies curriculum are founding board support of BDS. The board members support BDS. In ethnic studies, Zionism is deemed, quote, racist, colonialist, and part of a system of oppression, once again. And of course, every great teacher is gonna assign a great thing to read. So the critical ethnic studies, you know, if you're a teacher and you're gonna assign reading, there's already a reader ready to go. And this reader is a textbook. In introductory courses on ethnic studies includes several essays that demonize Israel with false accusations of genocide, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing. That's just about the Jews. I didn't even take a look at ethnic studies and what it has to say about America and the racism that it has towards the white people. Another parent screenshotted something and sent it to me a couple weeks ago, actually. Her son was taking a class on 9/11 and it was very troubling. The teacher asked, why did bin Laden issue a jihad? That was a question. Possible answers. A struggle or fight against the enemies of Islam. That's a possible answer. 2, the US was considered an enemy due to its foreign policies in the Middle East and Arab countries and its support for Israel. 3, Operation Desert Storm. 4, US presence in Saudi Arabia, quote, holy ground. This is, not only is this question absolutely offensive, but it inserts in the minds of, again, young people that these are 4 you know, normal reasons for issuing a jihad, a holy war. Now, let me ask you the following question. Let's say this was a unit on Nazism and the Holocaust. And the question was, why did Hitler want to destroy the Jews or kill the Jews? Possible answers. He thought that the Jews were a dirty race. 2, he thought that the Jews were overtaking Germany. 3, he was using the Jews as a scapegoat for issues that were happening in Germany. Normal teachers would make those kind of possibilities, realm of possibilities. This particular teacher, in showing these possible answers, inserted in the minds of students that indeed, maybe there was a reason for jihad, and maybe one of those reasons is United States and the presence on holy ground, United States and meddling in foreign policy, and boy, supporting Israel, the big crime. This particular unit I included in today's talk, even though it doesn't really have to do with BLM, nor does it have to do with ethnic studies, but I believe that these teachers are part of a generation that were trained by those in critical race theory, are coming out of universities, and this is the framework that they are applying and they're using in the classroom. So, how are classrooms being used? On the right-hand side is a fist. This image has become iconic with the BLM movement. On the left-hand side is a fist. And that is a fist from the workers' proletariat movement in the Soviet Union. This is a screenshot from my niece's classroom. Remember that assembly that inspired me to want to give this talk today? When I saw this, this was the assembly that she was at. Enough, stand up, justice, unity, Black Lives Matter, the fist. The fist is a fist of revolution, make no mistake, time for change. Everyone versus racism. It's not a moment, it's a movement. This is alarming, that our schools, instead of teaching literature, history, facts, are teaching ideologies, are teaching students how to be great activists, and are really preparing a generation for revolution. So I want to take a look at this. We began the question with institutions. We want to zoom in on this institution, the educational institution. Marxism, which I hope I have done not enough. I could have spoken a little bit more about it, but if we really look at the essence of Marxism, it is the idea that the world is divided into the powerful and powerless, and the powerful are evil and the powerless must be good. That's it. It's that simple. Out of Marxism grows these disciplines in the university: critical race theory, post-colonial theory. Out of critical race theory grows ethnic studies. Out of post-colonial theory grows many, but also gender queer studies. On the ground are social movements, BLM, BDS, and anti-racism. Also, I want you to understand that these movements I put specifically on the bottom because they're also working in a way that these on the bottom are reinforcing the disciplines. What is the danger of critical race theory? Critical race theory grows out of race theory itself. In a very important essay written by Tal Fortgang, The Incrementalists and the Revolutionaries, Fortgang argues that in the 1980s and 1990s, students in the classroom who were really wrestling with ideas of racism were looking at it from a, quote, incrementalist perspective. What did that mean? That means that people, individuals, can change themselves. So you would think through educational initiatives, the individual had the right to think, okay, how can I be less racist? Let's say, how can I fight racism? Well, the critical race theorists came out and said, no, that's not enough. Take the individual out, and now it's about the system. It's all about overturning the system. The individual doesn't matter. This is so un-American in many ways. America is about the individual, about freedom of choice and free will. Critical race theory completely overturns race theory, which looks at how can individuals vis-a-vis good education work on themselves to become better human beings. Critical race theory, like Marxism, looked at systems and says we need to change the systems. It's the systems that are crooked, forget the individuals. And I want to end tonight with an essay question, and this is an essay question from the Ethnic Studies model curriculum. Now imagine your son or your daughter, or if you're a teenager listening, you yourself are in a classroom, and the teacher passes out the following question. And the question is as follows, and I didn't make this up. This is a question from the Ethnic Studies model curriculum, the unit on Jews and Irish people. Write a paper detailing certain events in America and history that have led to Jewish and Irish Americans gaining racial privilege. When writing your thesis, think critically about why and who is allowing this evolution in white identity. And imagine yourself sitting there as a Jewish person, having to the answer has already been established that you are privileged. They're not even asking, is that even prove yes or no? It's already. How can you overcome that privilege is the question. You are inherently evil as a Jew. You have the power. You are privileged. And imagine yourself sitting in that class. And so I end like I ended last time when I spoke with all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, the Jews are indeed the canary in the coal mine. What starts with the Jews never, ever ends with the Jews. I teach very many times about anti-Semitism. I teach anti-Semitism to high school students. I teach to adults. I teach to Jews, and I teach to non-Jews. And I tell them one important thing. Anti-Semitism is a thermometer and barometer of a society. If a society has high levels of anti-Semitism, it's usually a very sick society. The fact that these elements, BLM, ethnic studies, anti-racism, critical race theory, have found themselves in one of our institutions, which is education, is a very frightening thing, because the first thing is going to be anti-Semitism, and then what I'm talking about is bigger than that. I'm talking about the institution of education. I'm talking about our children. I'm talking about your children. And if you're on the call and you are a teen, I'm talking to you too. And that's where I'd like to end tonight, because what we're seeing are forces that are mobilizing from top down and bottom up and radically transforming our schools and the classrooms. So thank you very much, and I really welcome all questions right now.
Thank you, Naya, for that incredible presentation, exceptionally eye-opening, and noting the radical ways in which what you've described threatens our education system. It's a subject matter that needs to be discussed, in my opinion, more widely and more often. So thank you, much appreciation to you and Club Z for leading this discussion this evening with our friends, our families, and our partners, as well as guests. On that note, Naya, I have a few questions for you, and our first one is from Ron. Ron asks, do you believe that these curriculum changes are done out of good or ill intentions?
I believe it's a mix. I believe it's a mix, and I'll tell you what I think. I think that this is a question that I got last time about BLM. The founders of BLM do not have good intentions. They call themselves trained Marxists. They're using the BLM movement, much like Lenin used the workers, to usher in a revolution. Does that mean that every single person marching along BLM has those intentions? Absolutely not. There are good teachers who are being indoctrinated too in classrooms when they went to schools. So unfortunately, it's a combination, but it requires sort of a jolting and a waking up and saying, all right, maybe this is not the most productive way of looking at society. Maybe we should think of morality. Maybe we should think of the individual and free will, right? And I don't think that people are asking these questions. I think that they're rushing very quickly to adopt what everybody else is doing to be accepted.
Thank you. Maya, what would you say to somebody who says that critical race theory is okay?
Oh, you're muted.
I was on mute. Now, our next question is from Anonymous. It's a statement, but I'm going to phrase it as a question. And what would you say to somebody who says that critical race theory is okay to learn about? Because it actually is just about how you interpret it. You know, just like you have your opinions, I have my opinions, everybody else does. And that's pretty much what critical race theory is. What would you say?
Listen, I'm all for learning, and I think learning is great. It's when you apply that theory as a framework, as a guiding principle for then how to enact policy. That's the question. The question is not whether we should shut down these theories. Absolutely not. My parents are from the former Soviet Union. I believe in freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, and freedom to learn everything we can. Absolutely, this should be learned. But the question becomes should it be applied as a guiding principle for how we should enact policy? And that's a big, important question that we should ask. That's all. Again, a lot of people ask me, well, why are you so, hung up on Marxism? It's not so dangerous. Well, I thought about, why are you so hung up on nationalism? It's not so dangerous. The theories are not dangerous. It's how they are applied that is dangerous.
Okay, our next one is from Phyllis. And Phyllis asks, why isn't there a concerted effort on the part of other Jewish organizations to address this, like Club Z is?
This as in anti-Semitic elements in education?
I think so. I think she's pertaining to this particular talk.
Well, let's put it this way. Let's zoom in particularly on ethnic studies. It's very alarming that ethnic studies has been in the works for 10 plus years. And, myself, I only found out about it a year ago. And I'm in this, this is my profession. So I don't know what the Jewish organizations were doing. But I'll tell you that today, Jewish organizations are trying very vehemently to oppose this ethnic studies curriculum. Amcha is trying to oppose this. Stand With Us is trying to oppose this. Club Z is trying to oppose this. Even the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles has written urging the people of Los Angeles to fight against this ethnic studies curriculum. And in fact, I would like to share how you too can oppose this ethnic studies curriculum. But the question is, why are Jewish, look, it's a bigger question of right now, it's a very sensitive time in America. Right now, no Jewish organization wants to touch these questions of racism or BLM. Well, we are told that as Jews, we must support all minority groups. We must support and come be at the first on the helm. But we at Club Z, we're not opposed to that. Do we ask another question? All right, we'll help, we'll be there, we'll stand side by side. But if you traffic in anti-Semitism, we can't. We just can't. And that's what I would ask other Jewish organizations. Don't jump too quickly. Analyze first. Look at these organizations. Look at their manifestos. Look at their language.
Now, you mentioned in that answer that you would like to share what else can be done in relation to this. Could you share that with us?
Today is the last day in California, and I will try to, because I'm sharing my screen, I'm just going to unshare it for a second, stop sharing for just a second, and I'm going to copy paste, to all of you, ways that you can oppose this curriculum. This is the last day for open comments, emails that they'll be accepting. There are two ways you can sign a petition, and I've sent it to all the panelists. If the panelists can in any way send this to the people who are watching, if you can copy and paste. There's another way you can do this. You can send an email. And those are the two ways that you can oppose this the ethnic studies curriculum. I unfortunately don't have the capability of sending it to the participants. I only can send it to the panelists.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, we seem to have gone through all of our questions. I'm going to do a 10-second wait for any last set of questions for Naya. I think we have something in here.
If I could just say something that is, to me, as a historian, most alarming is this particular moment in my presentation, where I took the language of Lenin in 1906 and basically copied, cut and pasted words that are hot words today: privileged, people of color, systems of oppression, interlinked systems of oppression. All I had to do was change the words because the framing is exactly the same. That to me is worrisome. And once again, I'm not opposed to learning about Marxism. I'm not opposed to learning about critical race theory. My issue is when we take these theories as guiding principles, as principles of morality. That's when it becomes dangerous. That's what I'm trying to urge us all to look at today. Why is it that on 9th grade honors English class, students are asked to exercise their mental muscles about racial injustice? Why?
Well, I think leaving us with that question, why, will cause us to think further, and that's a great place to end tonight's presentation. Once again, thank you so much. And thank you to all of our attendees this evening for taking time out of your evening to join us. If you have a teen and you would like to sign him or up to join Club Z, or you know of anybody else with a teen who is destined to be part of America's next generation of proud and articulate Jews, please visit our website. It is www.clubz.org. I'll say it again, www.clubz.org. You can also visit our website to learn more about us and to become a friend and a partner. But whatever you do, please follow us on Facebook, we're Club Z, on Instagram, Club Z, on Twitter, as well as LinkedIn. And that way you can continue to engage with us. Let's continue the conversations. You can also stay abreast of what we're doing across the country. We have chapters on the West Coast, chapters on the East Coast, and you can also receive notices of future talks like this one. Thank you so much and have a good evening.
Thank you.